The cinematic landscape of 2026 was completely reshaped by a micro-budget psychological horror film that captured the global cultural zeitgeist. Written and directed by visionary filmmaker Curry Barker, this shocking masterpiece centers on a lonely protagonist named Bear who uses a cursed occult charm to force his unrequited crush into loving him. What begins as a desperate attempt at romance quickly deteriorates into a horrific nightmare of lethal possessiveness and psychological entrapment. Produced by industry giant Blumhouse and acquired for a record-breaking sum at the Toronto International Film Festival, the movie struck a powerful chord with contemporary audiences by dismantling themes of modern infatuation, boundaries, and male entitlement. The psychological terror of this feature stems from its subversion of traditional horror tropes, replacing typical cinematic monsters with a deeply grounded exploration of modern dating anxiety and toxic limerence. Director Curry Barker masterfully avoids relies on cheap jump scares. Instead, he forces the audience to confront the horrific reality of what happens when a person's entitlement completely overrides another human being's free will. The dread builds slowly through the destruction of personal boundaries and the absolute decay of a familiar relationship. At the center of the terror is the visceral presentation of the uncanny valley, which manifests through Nikki's sudden behavioral transformation. When the supernatural charm forces her to fall in love with Bear, she does not become a traditional romantic partner. Instead, her body and expressions mimic human intimacy while remaining fundamentally wrong. Her prolonged starring, unnatural physical closeness, and erratic movements signal to the audience that her mind has been violently rewired. This constant sense of wrongness induces psychological hypervigilance in the viewer, as every smile and affectionate gesture feels like a threat. The film escalates its tension by weaponizing domestic spaces and turning everyday affection into a claustrophobic prison. The progression of Nikki's forced codependency manifests in deeply unsettling ways, from duct-tapping doors to isolate them from society, to building bizarre shrines and obsessively watching Bear sleep. The horror transitions from subtle social awkwardness into genuine madness when Nikki's actions turn grotesque, such as her serving a sandwich containing the meat of Bear's deceased pet. This domestic entrapment highlights the terrifying speed at which an obsessive dynamic can completely swallow a person's life. What makes the narrative uniquely devastating is the absolute erasure of Nikki's autonomy and selfhood. She is reduced to a hollow vessel, a human mannequin forced to project a happy facade to satisfy Bear's selfish desires. The audience watches in horror as a vibrant, independent woman is entirely reorganized around keeping another person pleased. This thematic core transforms the story from a supernatural thriller into a chilling allegory for real-world coercive control and abusive relationships, where one partner is stripped of their agency entirely. The terror reaches a peak during the rare, agonizing moments when the real Nikki briefly pierces through the curse. The film introduces deeply haunting sequences where her actual consciousness registers the horror of her situation. Whether it is a whispered plea for death while her body sleeps or an agonizing helpline call where her distant spirit can be heard screaming from a psychological purgatory, these flashes reveal that she is fully aware of her own imprisonment. The realization that she is trapped inside her own flesh, watching herself act against her own will, delivers pure existential dread. Equally terrifying is the psychological decay of Bear, the protagonist who serves as the story's true monster. Initially presented as a pathetic, lonely, nice guy, Bear quickly crosses an unforgivable moral boundary as the curse unfolds. The film brilliantly subverts the concept of romance by showing the moral ugliness of bypassing vulnerability. Bear uses a shortcut to bypass the emotional risks, awkwardness, and rejection inherent to genuine human connection. By choosing supernatural certainty over real consent, he proves that his infatuation was never about loving Nikki for who she actually was. This insight hits a nerve with modern viewers, highlighting how easily idealized attraction can mutate into a desire for complete possession and control. The surrounding characters offer no safety net, which heightens the viewer's feelings of isolation and hopelessness. As Bear and Nikki's relationship crumbles into madness, external friends misinterpret the toxic dynamic based on their own personal biases. Some believe Bear is exploiting her, while others think she is the one behaving unfairly, demonstrating how easily severe domestic abuse can be misunderstood or ignored by outsiders. This lack of intervention strands Nikki in her nightmare, reinforcing the terrifying reality that victims of coercive control are often completely alone in their torment. The most disturbing moment in the film occurs when the supernatural illusion of romance shatters completely, revealing the pitch-black horror of Nikki's psychological imprisonment. This sequence begins in a deceptively mundane setting as Bear and Nikki sit down for lunch. The curse forces her outer physical form to maintain a gleeful, deeply affectionate smile, but her internal consciousness suddenly breaks through the supernatural barrier for a brief, agonizing second. Ultimately, the feature is terrifying because it suggests that the most monstrous human desires can wear the mask of love. The supernatural charm acts merely as a mirror for the destructive lengths to which people will go to maintain an unhealthy fantasy. By stripping away standard horror tropes and focusing entirely on the collapse of identity and consent, the film leaves the audience with a lingering, deeply uncomfortable question about the dark potential of human attachment.